Hey, Dylan.
Hey, Mike.
Dylan, have you heard some sunburn rumors?
Not recently, but I don't know. You're the one with the leak, as it were, that
Um,
contacts
you know,
the shadowy figure
you
that
always
tells you
you
to
always get
meet
curious when
him.
your contact, your source, uh, goes silent on you. Like, what does that mean? Does that mean something's happened? Or does that mean something big? It usually in the case of software, it just probably means like they're working on it, coming out. But speaking of sunburn leaks, these are not facts. These are leaks. Um, but Sunburn's getting ready to come out with, or the potential is here to come out with. There's been some investigation into the possibility that they could come out with their own C-sharp compiler. Not interpreter,
Compiler.
compiler. What that means is it's possible to take your XNA C-sharp game running on the Sunburn framework, go through their little compiler, and get an iOS binary out of it. Maybe an Android binary. Early options I see coming, Win8 Metro. Win8 Metro, native Win8 Metro, not some kind of special Win8 Metro, runs in compatibility mode, just hit Alt, Windows key, Tab, Shift, or whatever magic you get to legacy mode. But maybe run in the App Store. The Windows Marketplace. I'm sorry, they can't call it App Store. I believe that's trademarked. The Windows 8 Marketplace. Not the Metro Marketplace, because you can't say that either. I don't know why, but that was a thing.
Metro.
Yeah, Metro's out. It's the Windows 8.
I guess we'll talk about that during the show.
Yeah, no, we won't.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's a possibility. And it's a reason. The reason I mention that is recently the Sunburn framework, not the engine, but the framework, was updated and free. So you can go download the free Sunburn framework and check it out. What do you not get? The main component is what they call the Sunburn engine, which is kind of the in-game tools that allow you to stop the game, edit, place lighting, do 3D effects, and do all that. There's a number of extra effects and abilities. I think HDR, if you're into that kind of stuff, can run as well. So you can grab that, and you could probably say like, hey, I have a 2D game. We have a 2D game. We're working on a 2D game, and we're looking at making sure, trying to get our tiled maps format running up on Sunburn, and get that running in it's a 3D engine, but that doesn't mean you can't do 2D. There's tons of ways to do it. Plus, they have a sprite container object that works similar to Sprite Batch that you can use. And so if we could get up running with that and get our 2D game in there, we can take some advantage of some effects and physics systems that the Sunburn framework and engine provide, controller input, abstractions, event-based programming. We can take advantage of several of these other features. But we might also be set to be a little future-proof. Maybe I don't want to mess with Mono XNA. Maybe the idea of installing that wonderful open IDE, what's that thing called?
Monodevelop,
which isn't that like based on the Java one that people use?
IntelliJ?
No, not IntelliJ.
Eclipse?
Like it's a plugin to Eclipse or something? Is that right? Can
don't
be?
know. I can't
I
remember.
don't know. I like my Visual Studio, man. I'm spoiled. I want to stay in my Visual Studio. I want to stay in my XNA. So, it's a rumor. It's myth. It's not fact. There's nowhere you can link to it. I'll deny this. No, I won't. But I will attempt to deny that I said this on the podcast, even though it's recorded for posterity, and you can go grab it in a couple other podcasts as well. So, you can't bank on it, but you can check it out, and maybe you're going to be future-proofed.
Where does the rumor end and speculation begin?
I think they're the same.
Are they?
I don't know now. I'm confused. Is
What have you heard?
is the smoking man the Illuminati, or is the
What have you heard
Illuminati
from your leak?
manufacturing the smoking man?
What have you heard from your source, and what have you interpreted from that source? What have you extrapolated from what you've been told?
Well, I can't really.
How can we know anything?
I can't really do that. So that would reveal too much information.
Exactly.
But if you want to go learn more, go check out more information on the Sunburn Gaming Engine and the free Sunburn framework at synapsegaming.com. All right, welcome to the show. This show, in a little bit after the news segment, before the Kickstarter segment, I'm going to run down the game conference that I went to earlier this week. So I went to the CGames conference. It was a 3-day conference. I went to the first 2 days. And it was focused mostly, almost all, in fact, was... It says it's supposed to be where industry and academia like come to exchange ideas, but apparently I was the only representative of industry. Everybody else
Such
is a PhD or a grad student. Yeah. So it was interesting in that respect, and we'll cover a little bit, but I took a lot of notes from a lot of sessions, because even though a lot of it was academic in like the pure sense of the expression, there were a lot of ideas that I came back with that I think could be applicable, or at least to think about in our own game designs. And then also, you know, like a lot of the stuff they were doing, I'm like, man, they actually are doing some really good stuff. They just lack good game designers to execute a fun game atop the concepts they were trying to do. And if they did that,
So
they could actually have something really revolutionary.
you mean the technical stuff was good, or they had these small concepts that weren't actually fleshed out and built
No,
together
more like
into a cohesive
they've done
game
put a lot of
idea?
research into diagnosing children with neurological disorders,
Right.
and trying to do that through games. So if the kids play a game, and then by the way they play the game, we can but the problem is when you saw the game, it looked like what you expected this edutainment thing to look like. And I'm like, man, if you could, I'm getting into a little of the subject, but if you could collect the right statistics from Minecraft, okay? And then once you have the statistics being collected that you can measure how the kids are playing the game, have a bunch of kids who have been tested to not have any disorders or neurological issues, and then have kids that have been tested and have been confirmed to have ADD or dyslexia, or, you know, any number of issues. Because the key is like getting these things early. But the beautiful part is like if you could gain that data from, then you could see if there was patterns in the way one group versus the other group played the game, and then you could test all kids. Kids love playing Minecraft, man. They just go in, they play, they have a lot of fun, they play it a while, but you could get the data that you need that might be able to help you on a much larger scale. Because the ideal situation is to all school-age kids do this stuff at some point, and then the 10 to 15% that might have issues kind of automatically get flagged for further review. For like, hey, you need to go, we want you to talk to a doctor, or we want you to kind of follow up. They're showing some signs. But I mean, it's touching to me personally. I have a cousin. He's probably in his almost 30 now, I think, at this point. Or, yeah, maybe 25 to 30, somewhere up there. And small town, they basically gave him, you know, kind of a diagnosis that he had some mental retardation, so he went through his entire life, going to all the special needs classes and everything like that, and then around, like, 23, another doctor goes, he's not retarded, he's deaf.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Wow.
He's hard of hearing. And that's why he has that speech impediment, and, you know, that's why he has a hard time understanding.
Seems like you could...
He's actually quite smart. Unfortunately, he's 23 at this point, you know? And that just sucks ass. And you know what sucks ass is, like, it was just, like, small town and all that, and, like, if he was able to sit down in front of a game and play a game, then people would have noticed, okay, he's not learning in school, but he's playing this game just as well as an intelligent kid does. So let's go down some other things. What else could be wrong here? What else could be the problem? You know? And then you find out, like, oh, he's deaf. That's very easily handled even in small towns.
Yeah, well, I imagine that would be different than most exams like this, where basically you sit down with someone and they walk you through an IQ test or, you know, some other, 20 questions to figure out.
Yeah, but it's the difference between, oh, no, the kid, he's just not paying attention, he's active. Or, no, he straight up has ADD. Like, he actually has a very extreme case of ADD, and you need to get him help.
You can't tell what the experience of the test is versus the actual thing,
The thing I like about the idea of the games test was that the current tests are biased, because the tests kind of like, if you get all this stuff correct, then you're fine, and if you don't, then you might have issues.
Right.
And the idea I like about, like, if you could just hook it up to Minecraft is, Minecraft is not forcing you into any success or fail states. Do whatever you want,
Right.
But if, and I don't know that Minecraft is, this takes further research, but if Minecraft could give you the data of behavioral patterns in this sandbox environment, which you isolate a lot of other things, like you don't have to worry about social interaction, you don't have to worry about any kind of awkward pressures by the kid, you don't have to worry about other kids and what they may say or something, the setting.
Yeah.
You don't have a time clock on the kid when he's taking a test. You don't have the whole idea of like, hey, I feel like I'm taking a test. I don't feel like I'm playing a game. I have to answer these questions as fast as I can. That's not a game. That's a test to the kid, You don't have the bias of, if I fail this, something's wrong with me. Like, then the kid kind of learns, because kids know, like, the difference between, like, a game on my DS Lite and a game in the hospital, that I play.
And you don't have, I guess, I don't know how much this factors in, but you don't have, like, a kid trying to second guess what the
correct answer is.
Yeah, like, what this test is actually trying to get. Like, what I have to do to look.
Right.
Maybe adults would do that more than children.
And the also thing is because of the BI stuff that I do, I really like to come up with systems and analysis patterns that remove as much bias as possible.
Yeah.
And going in and saying something like, even with the Kickstarter data set, what is the average amount a backer contributes? It has bias in that statement, because there may not be a true average. There may be clusters that are significant data points. So there may be a strong cluster of people who back for $10 and a strong cluster of people who back for $75. If I take an average, I get this false assumption that there's a person going in and backing, at $40, $50.
Right.
That doesn't exist. But what that also blocks me from understanding is the makeup of the $10 backer is different from the makeup of the $75 backer. They have different things and different priorities. And where that really falls down is, as Kickstarter, my marketing should be different to a $10 backer than to a $75 backer. Not in just like the types of projects, but, other things like that might go on. And it even might get to the point where, like, $75 backers are backing video games, $10 backers back movies, So if I know someone's a $75 backer, show him the tech stuff, show him the, things that he tends to back. Excuse me. So, yeah, I just like to come up with systems like that don't have an inherent bias in the system, and there's an inherent bias in a test designed to determine autism. Right? Yeah. Because, like, this test basically has two options. You have autism, you don't. And I would much rather go into a free play system. Similar thing could be like, observe the kids playing with Legos.
Right.
And how are the kids playing with Legos? And, like, if you watch enough kids, you should be able to come up with the patterns of, okay, a typical child will, at this age group, begin to understand, after they play with Legos for a while, some basic structural features of the Legos, some rules they will learn. These are how Legos work and how they can construct their things. And then kids that aren't will not, and maybe they will have struggle in these areas, and maybe it won't even be a struggle thing. Maybe it will be the types of structures the kids choose to build will reveal some kind of pattern or something going on in the kids. And we may even learn more from it than that because we're so unbiased at that point. Like the styles of structures and where they learn that, we might also start to learn like these kids are showing aptitudes and interests in these career directions, at this young of an age.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and expose this kid to some things down that path and see what happens.
Personality types rather than diagnoses.
Yeah,
like things that aren't like, this is a problem, just...
But we're giving the kids like this wild free play thing, and we're collecting all these mountains of data, and we're using our big data analysis techniques to look for patterns in the data, and then to see what that could do. And there could always be new patterns to find, and new things, So I don't know, I really did get inspired and all that. Running down lately going on, I think I'm going to play Chrono Trigger. I think I'm going to fire that up and play the DS version of Chrono Trigger. Watching the Giant Bomb run through on that, I realize now I have to make a decision. If I keep watching it, I'll never play it because there'll be no surprises left. I'm about 20 episodes in, and there was 42 in that playthrough. So if I don't do so now.
If you're already, though, to Zeal, now that I think about it, though, you're pretty far into the game.
Possibly.
But there are some more surprises.
But then again, like I said, that's half the time of their playthrough.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've played it, so my memory as to what happens later in the game is very, very fuzzy because I played New Game Plus so much that the first part is cemented in my mind.
So that's basically to try to educate myself on JRPGs, and I'll be hitting some other ones. Other than that, I haven't really played anything. I haven't been gaming. I've been getting ready, traveling for this conference. That's kind of what's been going on. I don't know if you've been working on anything. Got your new laptop, and you said you didn't have the Captain Dubstep audio problems, which is good to hear.
Yeah, the video problems I was having earlier. No, it's got a solid state drive, and it's pretty awesome at this point. So
those are min specs for Captain Dubstep on a PC. iCore 7.
So just for anything, it makes development so much easier because
now you've had a
Visual
taste.
Studio just
you've had a taste of the SSD life, and you can never go back.
Actually,
have you ordered an SSD for the desktop yet?
I'd actually done this because I picked up an 80 gig Intel hard drive on Newegg maybe half a year ago. I've never gotten around to it because, of course...
Was this like when they had it on sale?
Yes, that's exactly when. And of course, I
put that in hers, and it made a surprising impact on her computer, and her computer doesn't have a motherboard that will support, trim and
anything.
Other features, but it made, a noticeable Minecraft improvement.
I have noticed because what I did since I was basically running off my desktop for so long, and I've been transitioning to the new laptop, I'm like, well, I got it repaired, I got it back from Dell. I might as well just go ahead and start installing that because, everything I need to do from work, I can do on the new laptop. So I've actually got the SSD in the old laptop, and it's a noticeable difference. It's hard to tell whether it's actually the how much of it is the solid state drive and how much of it is just wiping clean and reinstalling. Interestingly enough, though, I'd bought the 80 gig drive, and then they had a sale later on an 120 gig drive at a really good price. So I'm like, okay, I'll just get that one because I was running about 90 to 100 gigs of disk use at that point. I was like, I don't know if the 80 is going to do it. So,
but at that point, you slap in a 2 terabyte. Western Digital slow-ass green drive and just dump all your data off onto it.
Once I get everything set up, I've got a hard drive caddy that I can use. I can format my old drive and do the same. Of course, I use external hard drives especially for virtual machines and stuff like that. So actually, I've got that 80 gig drive that I may I could put Linux on it and swap it out, or I could put, say, Windows 8 on it. I have no idea why I'd want to do that at this point, but...
Smiler2 mentioned in chat that the 240 gigabyte OCZ Vertex 3 is now affordable. And yeah, there are several SSDs on the market. Now, I have not updated my knowledge on SSDs in about a year. And, it's a rapidly changing thing. I would still caution people from getting a non-Intel SSD.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the failures, the problems, have come from off-brand. You don't really want to say off-brand, but they've come from a non-Intel brand. Because, it's Intel. They have a freaking huge lab. They can test that in hundreds, thousands of configurations and burn that in. And the magic of the SSD is not only the storage format, but it's a controller board on there, because there has to be some logic on that drive and how to use it. Because, you can only write to each block of memory so many times, so the drive kind of evenly wears that out. The controller board, evenly does that. And the time it takes that board to decide where to get things and how to store things and all that can greatly impact your performance. And when you go to SSD numbers, you got to be careful a lot of times, because they'll quote you read and write rates, but they're continuous read and write rates, and those are almost useless, because your system has so much going on at it at once. You really need the random read and write times on it. But, like I said at the start of this, my knowledge is about a year out of date. So Anatech and Tom's Hardware are great places to go and check up on their latest articles and see what their thoughts on the current gen, because they're always covering the latest SSDs that come out. Because that's really, I think, more than memory and CPU. That's even more than graphics card. That is the best thing you can do for your PC right now if you want performance, is to slap an SSD in it. Especially if you're a developer, man. If you're a developer, you need this. You don't realize you need this till you have it, but it makes life so much easier. All right, let's run down some gaming news, gaming dev news. This first one I thought was interesting in that off of Develop, that Sony lost out on Limbo because they wanted the IP. So Sony Entertainment, basically the developers of Limbo were talking to Sony first, and Sony not only wanted exclusive, which they did give to XBLA. There was an exclusive XBLA period. But Sony wanted to own the IP. And what is scary when you read that article is it's Sony that's revealing this information, not the developer. And he's basically saying, it was real unfortunate that the developer, who's had wild success with Limbo, right?
Right.
Didn't realize the obvious benefits to giving up the IP. And he's saying things like, remember, 100% of nothing is nothing. And a publisher is more likely to commit to marketing and merchandise if they own the IP. So basically, if your publisher's working with you and you haven't given the IP, we're kind of fucking stringing you along. We're just letting you know that. Read between the lines. Sometimes all we want is protection so that developers don't make a game, finish it, then go to one of our rivals. We look at IP on a case-by-case basis. With a bit of a common sense, you can find common ground. And I love the first comment, because remember, folks, 100% of everything is everything. And these guys did just fine retaining their IP. And I've said this before on our podcast. The age of giving up your IP to a publisher is over. And I think an indie developer, I would just say, never.
Go fuck yourself.
Never give up your IP. That is your asset. That is the one thing that you are building on your company and you is your IP. Never give that up.
And the interesting thing is, you played Limbo, and I remember...
I was not in love with Limbo. It was a okay platformer. I was looking for the art house indie game, and it was not that.
But the impression I got from you was that it was kind of... it was more about the style, there was not a whole lot of world building, a lot of plot going on. Am I...
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a game like I would expect to hear of Limbo 2.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like every game...
But once they owned the IP, they would have a say over Like, okay, you can't go to Steam, you can't go to XBLA, you can go to Steam or something.
Okay, I can.
So, I mean, they would probably have more control than just the IP. Because if they wanted the IP control, they want everything.
Yeah, I can see that, but it doesn't seem like it would lend itself to IP ownership. Like, there's not much you can get out of it.
Right.
Unless you came in and said, yes, there will be a Limbo 2.
It almost seems like Sony saying, yeah, you're a fucking little indie shop, so we're going to own your IP because we're the big bad publisher and we can abuse you this way.
But, I mean, owning an IP makes more sense for something like, a Call of Duty where, you can extend it out because, it's a complex game. There's a lot of different things you can do, as opposed to most indie titles, which, in order to move forward, you have to have that sort of experimentation, and so they don't necessarily lend themselves to...
Smiler Tune has a good point here on this in chat, too, of that Sony's never heard of contracts. Exactly. Everything the guy was concerned about could have been in the contract. Of like, yes, you will give us this time of exclusivity,
right.
You will deliver the game by this date, which they do all that crap anyway. Like, from what I've read from other articles, like, they give you a ton of freaking milestones, and if you miss a milestone, you don't get paid. They dole your advance out over time, as you meet these milestones. It's kind of a way of ensuring that, you're getting the game to ship. So, yeah, and you know what? The thing, like I said, was interesting in this article is it's by Sony, not the developers. And it's like Sony coming out and just not realizing how bad that was of a deal for them and saying, yeah, developers really need to consider this and give us their IP. All right. Got a couple of Valve things lined up here. But the first one is not specifically Valve, but Speedrunner HD. This was a forced scroller, wasn't it? I remember this game for XBLA.
Yeah, that was... Well, no, I think that's just a scroller.
There were a lot of forced scrollers.
There was. And, looking at it, I seem to remember this as being a forced scrolling platformer.
Well, I know that round is a forced scroller because you're being chased by a monster.
Yeah, well, no, you could still be running. You could still be manually running in that scenario. But, it's coming to Steam, which kind of surprised me because I didn't think of it as not a bad game, but I didn't immediately think that was Steam, based on where the Steam barrier is. And I'm not saying that Steam has lowered their barrier, but I think maybe they're being open to a little bit more. I think this is good in that they're being open to a little bit more diversity type of game and maybe depth that they require and things like that.
The forced scroller seems a little minimalist for Steam.
It does. Like they did not take the Radiant Games dual stick shooters, because again they were kind of minimalist and that was what they were looking for. So it's kind of arcadey, not like XBLA arcade, but like arcade machine, like pop in a quarter and go. Oh, I got my little 15 minutes of play. Okay, put in another quarter, get another 15 minutes. And so that overall is good. Don't mean this to bash Speedrunner HD in any way of like it's not a good game, but it may mean that they're widening what they'll accept a little bit on the platform. And speaking of Valve and Steam, they are bringing Steam to Linux. Now that's been talked about for ages, but it's basically been confirmed. Like this is confirmed. We're launching it. The studio is optimizing their version of Left 4 Dead 2, so that'll kind of be the launch game, and then plan to follow up with Portal 2 and maybe Half-Life 2 soon after that. Of course that means, they've got a lot of things going into Linux. And so, like, their Linux stuff is real. But guess who does not like this whole idea?
Richard Stallman.
Richard Stallman. Did you see this?
Yes, I saw this.
Man, that guy is so off his rocker, isn't he? I mean, at this point, can we say, like, there's anything... Because, like, people in the comments were like, you didn't read his post and all of this, where he basically called Valve unethical and insulted the idea, that all software needs to be free, including games, and you should give everybody the source code to everything. And, like, all right, I'm going to benefit of the doubt of Richard Stallman here and go read his stuff. But no, that's what he says. You know, he's just like all non-free software is evil. He has no gray area. He has no ecosystem of Linux happily supporting free, and, you know, it's kind of like why there's a free software foundation and there's an open source foundation. Right. Because the open source foundation had to split off from the free foundation software to say, hey, we're going to come up with licenses that allow free and non-free to run and coexist, you know? Then again, this is the man that, like, got upset at Linux because it wasn't called GNU, you know? GNU. It wasn't called New Linux or, you know, whatever, because, hey, these were all GNU utilities. And we were writing a kernel, we just didn't get to it yet. You know?
I look at something like this, and yeah, he seems
insane.
I would say a little bit out of touch, especially with where the market's going now. Because you look at, you know, as we move to tablets and devices and stuff like that, everything is becoming more and more closed. At the same time, you need voices like that to go, well, wait a minute, maybe not everything needs to be closed and controlled by Valve, Google, Microsoft, Apple.
Yeah, but the idea that you're gonna try to make money off of games by making them, you know, free.
There's no way you can do that.
No. Not at all. So yeah, I can't see it at all. I can't see it happening. Anybody else? Jim's posting audio problems. Anybody else also getting audio problems? I tried to shut down anything that might be taking up bandwidth. Oh, you know what? The girls like to play their Netflix. But that's not bothered in the past. Not been a big deal in the past. But I don't know. More Valve info. Valve joined EA, Sony, Microsoft, and everybody else in making class action lawsuits against terms of service. So there was a Steam EULA pop-up you got the next time you logged into Steam.
Yep.
And it basically says, no, you can't make a class action lawsuit against us anymore. What was interesting on Valve's thing is there was no option. There was no, like, opt-out, like the 30-day Sony thing and all that. And, which is interesting.
Even though
because if you didn't opt into that, you can't play your Steam stuff. Like, that would have, like, so the Sony argument was like, hey, there's an opt-out clause, and yes, you gotta mail it in, but then you could do that and still play your Sony games and run your Sony console. But, like, the Valve ones, it kind of...
I didn't see anything, and I read for a long while.
Well, the thing is like, if you didn't agree, you lost access to the games you've already bought, which has been a big argument of, like, no, that's a change of the terms of the sale after the sale. So, the important thing to remember about all of this, none of this stuff is seeing the light of day inside of a courtroom. So, the EU and the Canada have, in separate instances, ruled this kind of stuff, like, can't be, like, Canada's actually come out and said, no, you can't put in your EULA that you can't have class action lawsuits, period, end of day. What's funny is, like, the way they try to spin it as, like, it's good for the consumer.
What?
Because we won't have to spend money on lawsuits. Now, the one gamer had a good point of, like, look, class action lawsuits against a crib that kills babies needs to, you know, exist.
Right.
Nobody, like, dies from video games, so...
Who cares?
The idea of class action lawsuits for video games is kind of a different... Like, you know, maybe the avenue there is, like, trade groups, FTC, FCC, like, you know, misleading false advertising. But, whatever. I don't get too out of that. Jim's reading my mind here. Next thing I got up in the big lawsuit, big boy arena is EA's lawsuit with Zynga. Now, have you followed any of this, Dylan?
No, I think I heard.
Zynga
I think I saw this
released
today.
The Ville, which is a direct rip off of SimCity Social, and like Giant Bomb, I'm going to link to the Giant Bomb article, because they do a good job of, like, breaking out the court documents, where they actually, like, EA, like, lined up, like, hey, look, we have athletic, and they have jock, we have creative, they have artist, we have romantic, they have charmer, we have, every type that we have, they have an example that lines up for, and their screens and their options on their screens, down to the skin tone choices, match ours. Like,
wow.
So, okay, people were saying, like, hey, can't copyright games and all that. Like, no, this does get into copyrighted territory. Like, they have so blatantly ripped off. EA is actually putting forth the argument that to a common person, they may not know the difference. They may think one for the other. They're very similar in style. What's interesting was, now, it's gotten misreported a little bit. It wasn't EA, it was the head of Maxis. Now, Maxis is owned by EA, but Maxis is the one in charge of The Sims and the brands. The head of Maxis wrote the press release that basically said, yeah, EA, Zynga is evil incarnate, and this is going to be, we are taking this to court. This is not a settlement option. This is going to be a win for all the little ones who have gotten attacked and Zynga has rolled over. This is going to be a win for the creatives, and all that. What you have to understand in that context of that comment is that was made by the Maxis studio, which they probably inside of EA operate pretty autonomously. They kind of see themselves as their own little creative shop. They're very successful financially for EA, so I don't think EA pokes a lot of buttons on there. But that's not EA saying that, who are the ones that filed the lawsuit, so I could totally see a settlement, Zynga shutting down the Ville or doing significant changes to it to appease EA and paying a big money.
But it's not going to bankrupt them or stop them from doing this. It's a moral victory, but...
Given what we talked about Zynga in the past...
Right.
With Zynga's big trouble financially, Zynga's accusations of people dumping stock before it went down, the whole like, hey, we're going to get into real money now because we can't make money anywhere else, real money poker.
This might be the flake that starts the avalanche.
The thing is, Zynga responded with, you ripped off Cityville. So SimCity Social ripped off Cityville, which is like, Zynga, don't go there, because Maxis and EA, they did SimCity, right? Like the mother of all, like the only person who could come out against Maxis would be like Mule, okay? Like M period U period L period E period, like Mule. Go look it up for the C64 if you don't know what I'm talking about. Like that to me would be the first instance of this. Although Mule to SimCity, it's got spiritual roots. It's a hard sell to say it's any kind of thing other than a spiritual successor.
Even video games back before, like, social, the social arena is where you see a lot more true rip-offs happening.
But for Zynga to counter with EA stole from us, that is some weak shit ground, all right? Especially when Maxis will at some point walk into that lawsuit and go, they're claiming they stole from us, but we're going to, they're saying Cityville? Let me show you Tiny Tower. What was it Tiny Tower in Cityville, or was it Tiny Tower in whatever?
Like Tripletown.
Tripletown, that what it was? Yeah. So they're just going to line up like, every game Zynga has ever done has been the ripoff of another game. And so they're going to say they stole it from us, but look, icons, art, menu screens, like, you can make a damning case.
Not just that Zynga stole from them, but that Zynga stole from a lot of people.
This is a pattern
behavior.
This is pattern behavior, which will entitle statutory damages to go up because it's with foretent and malice at that point. So that's a bad result. But I think Zynga has to fight this, honestly. Because if Zynga settles, do you not think there will be an army of lawyers beating down the Tiny Tower and not the Mafia Wars or Mafia? What was the other one? What was the real one?
I don't know.
Mafia Wars was the real one.
Was the real one?
It was.
Like, was Mafia Wars the one where they stole it and then turned around and sued? No, that was Farmtown, I think.
Farmtown and Farmville.
Where they ripped off the town and then sued them for infringement of the name or something when they clearly came second or something. There's one of them they did that to. And do you not think there's not going to be, once they realize there's money, once there's blood in the water, once Zynga has paid an infringement case, either by losing or by settling, then there's going to be too many lawyers, like say, like, hey, you know, Tiny Tower, we'll take a cut of whatever we get, you know? Yeah. And the game will be gone for the market, and you'll make more money on your game because, you know, we'll eliminate competition this way. And, you know, not all of them, but some of them will go, okay. And Zynga doesn't want that world. Like, once that door is open, you know...
It's not closing.
Yeah,
no.
That's like, you know, the destroyer is here, choose the form. You know?
Yes.
You know, that's like, you know, Stay Puft Marshmallow Man is what goes
They already
next.
know what the case is against them now.
Right.
I don't know what the next case is
So they really
gonna
got
be.
to win this in court, I think, and unfortunately I don't think they have a good shot at it, but they do need to win this in court. Will be interesting, though, if they do win in court, because there's always this, you know, clone, ripoff, so-and-so suing so-so over games, and then they get settled, and, you know, a lot of times it's like big companies attacking indies for games that are similar clones but don't vary in enough, and then, you know, they go off that direction. It'd be interesting if Zynga won this, because it would actually be reaffirming, like, well, the art assets are different. They are not the exact art assets. They did not rip off your art assets. You cannot copyright the rules to a game. You don't have a patent on it. So, tough shit.
Yeah,
Like,
and
that is the realm, but that's why I think EA is making the claim that they have stolen the entire design and aesthetic, and, you know, like, they are going to be they are designing their game to be confused. They are trying to be a Gucci knockoff, you know, by making their brand label look identical to Gucci's except for one change, like, you know. They're both 2 all-beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, but they use a sesame seed bun and we have a plain bun, you know? They are McDonald's, we are McDowell's, right?
yeah. I mean, it seems like this is a problem that's going to happen in social games anyway. I mean, this kind of represents why I don't play games on Facebook, because they feel kind of scummy. If Zynga wins, it just gets worse.
Yeah, it does. But then it's like Zynga just go after whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Anarchy, Wild West rules at that point. Talking about interesting companies of questionable support backing, the Ouya founder made a lot of press this week, actually. One of the things was on the security of the device, saying wonderful quotes like, rooting the device won't give you any more access to the software. And, you know, I'm thinking, like, you don't know what the word rooting means, do you? Also, you don't know what rooted Android devices look like. I had a tweet that was pretty good, that got retweeted a couple times, where I basically said, like, oh, so what you mean is just the normal 80% piracy of Android then, and linked to the article with the guys of like, hey, we've had an 80% piracy rate of our app.
Well, but this is the problem you run into. You either claim to be an open source console, in which case you have to deal with that inherent possibility of piracy and everything, and that's fine. Or you have to choose to be closed, and you have to deal with the fact that you're a closed console, but you can offer a little more to developers. You can't be both.
Yeah, I do think
And
there is a degree of mutual exclusivity between security and openness of the platform. Yeah. And, you know, I don't think it's in the sense of like, hey, because the source code's out there, you're automatically hackable, and you just have to security to obscurity. But they've gone to the extreme of like, this is a hardware hackable console. If you take a screwdriver to it, you won't void the warranty. And it's like, see, that means any kind of DRM chip check will be easily disabled. So,
well, I again, like I was saying with Richard Stallman, like I think having someone on that side of the industry is a good thing. Like, you know, Apple, Google, Steam, Microsoft do some great things, but they all have heavy DRM. They're moving, in many cases, further in that direction. There is potential for them to do evil.
Well, and
so having that space is a good thing, but
you know, and also just between iOS, iPhone, and Android phones,
yeah,
one is no less hackable than the other. They're both rooted. You can both install it, but Apple maintains a very tight security hammer on, like, any tampering with the device will get you kicked out of the Garden of Eden, right? Whereas Android will not. And you have an 80% piracy rate on Android. I don't know what the piracy rate is on iOS. Nobody comes forward and complains about it. Everybody talks about, yeah, there's piracy, and some copies of our game are piracy, but we're too busy Scrooge McDucking in our towers of money to care, you know?
And it may also be, you know, just the number of sales you get off the normal device, you know, through normal channels offsets whatever piracy there's going to be.
And
just
a lot of the piracy that I've seen is for, like, the farm games that I play. Like, you'll have an official count that you don't hack, and then you'll have an unofficial count so that you can get all the probabilities from whatever current limited time offer is there.
I mean, the ones that are going to be less likely to be hacked are going to be your free-to-play model games where all the data that matters is server-side and validated on the server. What is going to be next to impossible to secure is a downloadable standalone game. You know, so like your current XBLA, Xbox indie games, you know, iOS apps and things like that, that's going to be much more pirated. If you've got a game where they just need a client and they're paying you to access a service,
clearly,
then you'll be able to, like, at that point, who cares if they pirate your client? Like, if they don't have an account, then they don't get access to anything. So I don't know, but definitely, like, the trend of damage control in the press continues, where the founder also came out, Julie came out again, and denied it was seeking extra funding. And I got the develop article because she actually told develop, you know, like, these lines where she said, this is a really, you know, they asked her, like, are you seeking additional funding, like, beyond Kickstarter, because a console is expensive and we're not convinced, like, $99 a console covers development, you know, from this Kickstarter. And she answered, like, this is a really big undertaking and it's going to be expensive. We're looking for additional funds of money, but more importantly, we wanted to take it to Kickstarter regardless. And that's what she said. And now she's, like, issuing statements and backing up, saying, like, no, we're not, like, getting other money from other sources. And if we don't get those fundings, you know, things fail. We're just taking Kickstarter money, and we're all focused about the Kickstarter money. And we're all focused about shipping on it. And it's like, you said this, though. Like, they've gone back and double confirmed, like, you know, what was said and you know, everything. And so, I don't know. Like, I'm not a backer of it. I kind of have my hesitation on the success of this device.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know, just interesting. But guess what? Square backs it by releasing Final Fantasy III HD.
They will release Final Fantasy III on everything.
On the Ouya?
You're Android right now, right?
Yes.
Can you already get Final Fantasy III? Because I can get Final Fantasy III on my iPhone.
I don't know. I can check.
See if Final Fantasy on there. The reason I have it
for DS
because they want like $15 for it, which is ridiculous.
I have it for DS, and I've bought so many copies of Final Fantasy 1, like we were talking about. I bought it for Nintendo. I bought it for, you know, PlayStation 1, and I bought it for GBA.
Like $10 on my iPhone to buy Final Fantasy 1.
Holy crap! Yes, it is. It is on here for $15.
It is on there for $15. So
told you.
Final Fantasy 1
what they're
is
saying
$7.
is Ouya runs Android. We've already ported it to Android. So we're gonna back the Ouya. You know, it would be interesting if they were like, you know, Final Fantasy 12-2 or 13 or 14, whatever the hell they're doing. I don't know what they're doing, not doing. I haven't been following those articles.
But again, you're not going to get A-list titles on an open source console. You can't be all things to all people. You cannot reshape the industry.
Which I think at some point we said, basically the Ouya is going to be a great MAME and NES emulator.
Yeah, you can't reshape the industry trying to do an open source console, but I think you can provide a good counterpoint to, the publisher heavy, closed systems that are ever, kind of standard now.
So, other news I wanted to point out, Kotaku, which I subscribe to again, skim their crap, and I'm getting ready to unsubscribe
because you hate
again.
yourself, I guess.
Well, because like some articles have come out, and I wanted to mention the articles, and I like to star things in my Google Reader, and so I got to subscribe to them to mark their articles. They had this big thing on here is the game industry's biggest problem is that nobody wants to talk, which really, reading the article, is publishers and developers don't want to talk to Kotaku about things they're not ready to talk about yet. And they were all like, film industry gives like, they don't mind like people talking about who's working on what and where they're at and production and all that.
Yes, they do.
Like half of that's true, but half of that's not. Like you're just like, there's certain things the film industry does not talk about. Also, certain things are not like a problem. Nobody asked the film industry, so what platform is this coming out on? Even things like 3D. There's some films that are like, yeah, we're shooting it in 3D. We'll see, Yeah. They're not like hounded for like, no, you said 3D or, and things like that. I mean, maybe they are a little bit, but...
it's not a question of whether the consumer will see it.
So as I read this article, and they got some points on there of just like, that sometimes they won't confirm a game's existence. And they were talking about like Final Fantasy 13, which was announced in 2006. And like, is it still under development basically?
You mean 13.2 or 13?
It says 13. I think that was announced right after 12.
I can't remember, honestly.
Because I want to say there was some news about whether or not it was Xbox or PlayStation, and I want to say they announced it was PlayStation only. Like right before they launched the... But that's not 2006.
Mm-mm.
So I don't know. Anyway, they were saying like they mentioned it in 2006 or something, and now it's like, 6 years later, what's going on? And like they're getting no things, but people like pointed out, like, hey, dude, like they're not gonna tell you like shit's going horrible. Like, you want to really have developers like read on the front page of Kotaku that they're gonna lose their jobs. Like that's not the kind of information that goes to PR, and they talk about that. And the funny thing is, as I was reading this, I was thinking, in Kotaku, you guys are the fucking worst. Like, I hate reading your site. Your reporting's so shitty. You sensationalize everything. All the Gawker media sites do this, I read none of the Gawker media sites. And it's funny, because, like, as I'm doing this, and somebody sends me this link, and so, like, I'm over in my other screen where my tweet deck is up and in Chrome and chatting back to him of, like, how much idiot, like, some tweets from Notch starts coming right in, where Notch goes, it would be great if more devs talked, but there are real reasons why many choose not to. Kotaku is unfortunately part of the problem. And then he follows it up with the next tweet, the shitty Wirecast software is choosing not to stream it. There it goes. And then his next tweet was, just this week, a reporter from them tried to get me to talk bad about Windows 8, for example. Don't like the store idea. I like the rest of it, or like the rest of it. And, he kind of is explaining, like, they wanted to phrase, like his fear is like Kotaku would take this and phrase like, not shits all over Windows 8.
Kind of like, incidentally, they did for Valve.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing, and that's kind of what he's, like, citing there. It's funny, like, there's responses to his tweet from, like, all these Kotaku writers of, like, we contacted you and tried through several channels and, all this and stuff like that. And it's funny how they, like, protest too much in their replies.
He may be reading between the lines as well of what...
So, yeah, I thought that was interesting. The last little bit of news is interesting, maybe slightly sad. I don't know. ID Software shut down mobile operations. And now, John Carmack said that this was mostly because the teams wanted to work on Doom 4. Like, the company and the teams were all excited about AAA games and Doom 4, and they're just not motivated to work on mobile titles. So he kind of, like, has a line in here that says, like, they were great, we were working on them, we were having success, we were making money from it. So it doesn't seem to be like, there's no money in mobile for us, so we're abandoning the platform. And I say that because, like, John's a smart motherfucker who would make crazy awesome engines, and you wouldn't believe the performance that you would get out of a mobile device. Now, I haven't cared for any ID games like Rage or whatever that came out.
Yeah.
I played that on a friend's iPad, and, I was like, okay. Yeah, it looks really awesome. I mean, it does look amazing, but it's not the experience that I want.
But that's also a console and PC title, isn't it?
Was it on all things? I don't remember. But, like, on iOS, it's very iOS. It's very, tap, swipe type on-rail shooter experience. So I thought that was a little unfortunate that they would exit, but it doesn't seem like it was a bad reason to exit. Okay, before I get into Kickstarter, so CGames was the name of the festival conference that I went to.
Festival.
I took a ton of notes from several changes to my own session. Let's see here. Let's get here. One of the early sessions was on dyslexia detection. We talked a little bit about that earlier. I don't have any good notes from that. The next session that I was at was games for expertise training. Bad title. The subject was using in-game links to forums from, like, the beta to get direction on design and developing a system. It was almost like a Reddit, and allow Reddit to control your game design. Frankly, the idea horrified me. Let people vote on the direction the game should take in design.
Is this kind of like the Greenlight thing that you were talking about with Valve, except...
No. So Greenlight is voting on a game should be on Steam.
Okay, I see what
this is. I'm writing my game, I'm making a beta, allow people to play it, and then whatever they tell me I should do to it based on voting and weights and everything on this algorithm, that's what I do. And so the designer basically ensures fairness in the systems, but implements essentially this design by the crowd system. And I don't know, like in that moment, I was very much feeling like the games are art rage. Like, you've destroyed and killed the artist, and there's no vision in a game like that. But also, like, I was thinking of the Henry Ford quote of, like, if I asked people what they want, they would have said faster horses. You know?
Right.
And I'm thinking, like, there's no...
Well, I mean, it's a good way of implementing Agile. It's good, but if you make a system that you can never break the rules, I think you've got a problem.
I think the error was in driving the game design with it and not using it as a feedback cycle. The other thing on this was a little French girl, and man, like I think this was the first time she spoke, did a conference or did a talk, because man, she started out high pitched and fast, and it just
She was going to the moon and past it.
The good thing was she knew her topic well, so she could just like go through and read her stuff and you know,
there were
stay
very
on that.
little
Yeah.
She knew what she was talking
She didn't get stumbled up and paused, but man, I just kind of wanted to like, okay, slow down, breathe. It's cool. Just have a conversation. It's fine. You know, we're all here. We're all here for you. There was another games for children with disabilities. I noted that parents participation increases when like a game helps diagnose their child versus an expert. Like
Right.
they tend to marginalize someone telling them there's a problem with their child, but when it's like shown in data collected from a game,
I wonder if that's the whole distrust of experts. Like,
Yes.
what do they know?
yeah, maybe there's some of that built in. But that topic, unfortunately, for most of what they presented on, they had no real examples, and it was an ongoing study, so I didn't take much notes down from that. Then there was a games on... By the way, these are all called serious games. That is the topic. All these where I'm saying, like, the next session was called Games and Health Informatics. No, it was called Serious Games for the Use of Management of Health Informatics. Like, even though these are academics using games, they can't fucking bring themselves to say, like, we're working with games. No, we work on serious games. You know? Which
I guess if they have a purpose.
Well, I found funny because I gave the keynote, and I opened the conference with the keynote, and my point in my keynote was, all games teach.
Right.
All games are these serious games. If a game is not teaching, it is not fun.
Well, I guess the question is, what is it teaching?
Yes.
If it's only teaching about itself, then...
Right. A game can teach about itself and still be fun. In fact, most games do. But they have to be teaching something. My example is like, the game can teach you that if I run along and hit my head on a block with a question mark, a mushroom comes out that makes me big. That's what I taught. That's what the game taught me. I'm not saying it has to be useful. It has to teach something or it becomes boring and it's not fun. And that's like, that was my point, right? Of like, games haven't left education, education have left games. So I found it funny of like them trying to classify games versus serious games and maybe having like this whole thing of like, yeah, that classification's stupid. We need to get rid of that because it'll be better for you and designers both to understand teaching is integral to good gameplay. So the health informatics, what are my notes here? Many diagnose and treatment, but they don't use games in other areas. So they use games are becoming popular in diagnosis and treatment things. So like Alzheimer's. Like get grandma playing a game with Alzheimer's because that'll slow down the progression of Alzheimer's, possibly. You know, keeping active helps that. And they use it in diagnosis, but not other areas. And I was kind of thinking, like, what other areas? Like, I don't want my doctor playing a game. You know, I don't want him playing like the house mini game. You know, to figure out what's wrong with me. Like, I don't. No areas are leaping to my mind. I'm not an expert in the area, but that was it. But they do need to start thinking on the games, and I thought we could adapt this as game designers as well. But he did hammer home like multiple viewpoints to a game. You know, like when you write this game or you make this game, you not only need to think about the patient, but the therapist, the doctor, the psychologist, like all the different people that may be involved with this. And you know, some of this could be games, and some of this could be interfaces with the data. But I also think we have a problem with that in software in general. We tend to make like one interface to the software instead of thinking like, okay, there's going to be 3 types of users, so maybe I should make 3 types of interfaces that benefit. And then I got a quote here, which basically a focus on what data games can reveal, but not what these games are. That was kind of my note to myself. Basically to say, like, collecting data in games can reveal a lot more. Like I was talking about earlier, of getting away from the bias. So basically, that's why I wrote that note down after his talk. That was not in his talk. That was basically what I was thinking. So there was this session on a meta model for sim games. So basically, could you abstract this meta model? So the problem trying to be solved was like, hey, for these different problem domains, we have to write entirely new one-off games, and if we just kind of had this meta model for any game that was kind of a simulation game, then maybe we could load it up. And he just tried to generalize things into general learning taxonomy. I wrote down knowledge comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation as like flow steps in learning that he wrote down on there. The funny thing is that the game itself was about software development, and so the students had to build a sprint, or plan out their sprints, and how they would get to build them. And it was like an educational version of Game Dev Story. Like, I went up to him afterwards and I'm like, you totally need to play Game Dev Story. It might help you in figuring out this taxonomy, and also it will totally be what you were trying to go for here.
Possibly, but I don't know. Like,
but you could take Game Dev Story and make it software development, and by the success of the software, teach the right things that you want to teach, right?
Right.
So like in Game Dev Story, if you combine action with player, you have a very successful game. If you combine kittens and puzzle game, it's a successful game. If you put kittens and ninjas together, no.
But
the game is kind of teaching you what combinations work, and you could adapt that to say, okay, if you put these team members on there, or like one of the things that was talking about his game, it would work well, was like the students did better in his game if they hired a diverse team. If they hired a bunch of people with identical skill sets, they would have a harder time planning their sprints. And I'm like, you could do that in Game Dev Story. The production of the team would be better if you had a diverse set of skills. If you valued diversity over homogenization of the team, then that would be a good way. You could build in the teaching of the game based on how it rewards. 'Cause that's what you would ultimately learn from. You would make a software thing in the game like you do Game Dev Story, and then it goes out and it sells this amount or does this well and gets reviewed poorly. Then you go like, oh, okay, I want to figure out how I can do this better. And you got to leave the clues and hints in the game as to, well, that's an odd combination, like it'll tell you, like that's probably not good. Hey, the teams are really excited about this combination. So you could adapt that, I think. You could adapt that. Also, like, I didn't tell them this, but like, you should download a lot of the games made by this company, because they definitely have an engine that's cranking these things out. What did I go to next? Performance of multiplayer using parallelizing compilers. This is one of the sessions that was by like a grad student, where you kind of go like, are you doing this to become a PhD, or are you figuring out a cool way to play games and be in college? Because he took, was it Unreal Tournament that he took? Or, no, Quake 3. I don't know, Quake 3 and Unreal Tournament came up a lot, so it could have been either or. And basically programmed, the bots in the game by making the bot AI multi-threaded, so it could take advantage of multiple cores.
Right.
And then showed an increase in performance of the game and loaded the CPU, and freeing up things like the bots could be more intelligent now with more things. And he had, so basically it was okay, if you're going to go multi-threaded, most of his problems were pointer and memory based, which go out the window with .NET. In fact, I asked him, like, have you heard of .NET 4.0's parallel task library? because it's totally doing the things that you were talking about. Like, it's built in at a language level, not like things you have to worry about on top of it, because he was doing C and C++.
Right.
But then the other things seem to be like things we would run into as well that were solved by locking an object before updates are applied to it. Performance hurt by, data checks, basically. Like, the less you have to check your data, the better, on that. So he had a general rule of thumb, though, was to isolate the action from the data that acted upon it. And I sat down with him and had some good conversations with him through the rest of the conference. And I basically talked to him of like, what you are putting up there, what you've come about, is what's known as the worker queue pattern, where you have some item that needs to be done. So the requester throws it on a queue, and then a worker comes and grabs things off the queue and then executes them. So that you have this asynchronous relationship between the two, and you can scale that up very well. And I also told him, like, if you go down that road, there are patterns for handling contention and locks and real-time nature. Like, that's a well-known space if you just know to pump it to Google worker queues. And I said, like, there's actually, like, a lot of good Azure documentation on that system. So that was some of my notes from that one. Dynamic difficulty in game. I was all set to take a lot of notes on this one, and turned out not to have a lot of meat behind it. So it basically launched with some stats. Started talking about stats off of some CNN article that 90% of gamers will never finish the game. Who start the game never finish the game. I don't know what the numbers are behind that, what the survey was involved on that. And so the whole idea of like managing the difficulty, and things like that. But the more he went into that, like, so the other problem that he mentioned was like, if you go into a game, there's no universal accepted baseline of what hardcore means, of what easy means. Although I think games do a really good job of saying, like Mass Effect will say, this is the level that Mass Effect was intended to be played upon, right?
Yeah.
And, this is for veterans who want a little bit more harder combat series, This is for people who want to enjoy the story only and not have to worry about combat and things like that. So I think they do a better job describing that, but really the way he presented it, it kind of got to this homogenization of the difficulty, and I even, like, objected. Like, I had a question, and I'm like, have you really, like, done a study on, like, when you apply these rules, do people finish the games more, and do they enjoy them more? Are they more engaged throughout the games? Because I'm starting to wonder, like, chess games all have modes, basically, where you play the computer, and it throttles itself so that you lose 3 out of 4 games, and I kind of lose interest in them, because I know no matter how good I play, I'm going to win 3 out of 4 games. Once I win my game, even though I'm getting better as a chess player, it doesn't feel like a fun game anymore, because I don't feel like I can ever have my sense of empowerment.
And the question, too, is, like, how do you standardize across genres and games, and where's the ability for a game to, like,
right.
Ninja Gaiden on, when the Xbox game, the whole point of that was, this is super hard.
Right. Somebody else asked that question of, like, there are people who like these insanely hard games.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted out of his session...
What's the scale?
What I wanted out of his session is, yes, I wanted some distribution numbers, I wanted some scale, I wanted some tips on applying dynamic difficulty. Not just like, here's the idea of a dynamic difficulty system. Let's see. So, I got some more notes here. So, now there was a good point of modeling the difficulty adjustment. And he mentioned some things that I wouldn't have thought of immediately, because I haven't written a dynamic adjusting game, but not just like win or success rates of battles, but to watch like how frequently they are loading and saving games. But again, you can just have a type of player who saves frequently. And that's not a sign of, like, I'm having a lot of problems. You know?
It's just, I'm playing it safe.
I just want to see the other dialogue option. You know, like, that is a style of player. So that could mess that up. And then he got into ways to set off these things. Basically, he had, like, there are sensors, triggers, and kind of case-based logic things. So this was kind of oversimplification, I think. I think anybody that dives into it would know, like, hey, you know, I'm going to have a sensor that monitors how often they lose, and I'm going to have a trigger of, like, they've just lost their third fight in a row, and that's going to handle some case-based logic of, okay, if they're doing this and they've lost that, then go ahead and adjust the
I imagine what you want is a system that that is hard to game. Like, oh yeah, I know if I do this, it'll make it easier.
Right. And that's the thing, like, people... That's the other thing, and I didn't mention that because I asked my one question, and I didn't want to keep asking a bunch of questions, because it just didn't seem like the thing to do. Like, you kind of ask one question, and you let somebody else ask. If nobody else asks, they're done. But, like, when gamers realize there's a rubber banding effect, they quit or they exploit it. You know? Like, watching Chrono Trigger playthroughs. Okay, it became very obvious that the little race segment that they do, when you're in that future world, that one guy wants to race you, that is a rubber banded thing. It does not matter what you do, and the first...
It is all about timing.
90% of that, it is just the ending finish line. Just save your boosts to the end, and get in front, and then boost, and then cross the finish line. That's the only moment that matters. And it destroys the immersion in the game, and it exposes game mechanics to the player, and it's not a good moment. That is never a good moment.
One thing I've noticed recently, I started playing Rocksmith again, and of course that is a good example of dynamic difficulty, because obviously you have to keep replaying the same thing over and over.
Did you experience the same kind of chess problem that I had, where it left the game realm and became, like, practice?
To a certain extent, like, I had to, like, okay, I can't play this song normally, then I'm going to have to go into Riff Repeater and level up each of the different sections, and I actually had to take strategies on it. But what was interesting as I got to higher levels was there were a couple songs where I'd keep playing, and not quite get it, like, inch closer to the score, and at some point the game would say, you know, given, again, that this is a game that is built in kind of the concept of leveling up the difficulty, it'll say, oh, hey, you have... I forget how it phrases it. It was basically like, do you want us to lower the event qualifier? Yes or no? And it's interesting because it never says there's no downside to it. So I can do it, and, that's one less thing I have to worry about it. Or a lot of times I'll lower the difficulty and then win anyway, because I was so close. Anyway.
Try not to laugh. The next session was game design documents from a software engineering perspective. So this is creating the standardized format for game design documents coming from the software engineering perspective. And it launches into...
Because clearly there's standardized formats there.
We should have an overview section. There should be an overview, mechanics, aesthetics, experience, and assumptions and constraints sections should be in your game design document. We're following the IEEE SRS 830 1998 updated 2009 spec on specs. So there's an IEEE spec on writing specs. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not surprised, but yeah.
All sections, I love this, should be traceable, correct, unambiguous, complete, consistent, verifiable, and modifiable. That just sounds like this entire insane... This is like the worst of waterfall. Like, that's all I could think of when I sat in here. Of, like, you have made it, like...
you cannot achieve 100% certainty. You cannot eliminate all risk. You cannot eliminate all possibility of confusion.
And that's just a bunch of
accept it.
Buzzword gobbledygook.
Yeah,
that really is kind of meaningless.
Now, I will say that specs and things like that, for example, like taking systems analysis and design in college, it was useful to see all of those types of documents, not because I use them regularly, but because it helped me know what questions to ask, what to think about.
It kind of helps you understand the process.
It
doesn't add to the process, but it helps you learn what the process will be.
It gives you a tool set, not, a prescribed...
You should rank all your items in each section so that when there are conflicts and problems, you know what to cut. So everything should be ranked according to importance.
That's kind of agile, as long as you can change the rank.
He had a link to an example format. But what was interesting was they published the Fireball game design document to Gamasutra, and it sounded like it wasn't kind of straight out, and it sounded like it was like put out there for comments, and it kind of got like the expected. If you were to post a document of that type of like, here is our game design document critique, that you would get a lot of like, what the hell are you doing? Like this entire document, the idea, is just wrong, right?
TLDR.
Right, yeah. So, not included in their thing, but came up often. They said they did say hey, there were some things not in your documentation that should be in there that are kind of important. One was the delta log, so basically kind of a source control, but also a log of we are deviating from original plan for these reasons, which actually seems like a good idea. That's not actually pre-design document stuff, but that is a good log to have, so you kind of have a record running of why you did the things that you did.
Yeah. Because choices are what define your game.
Another section that actually was really good was, I think this was a good idea that was kind of suggested from their Gamasutra post, was how to design the level. So in the guide, here is the guide for level design, so that you explicitly write out, this is what we want out of level design, so that, as people build out levels, there can kind of be some consistency and thought put into, yes, levels will work this way, these will be used for boundary objects, these will how power-ups will be placed, that actually sounded like a good idea. But yeah, again, I have my note that they killed the artist in this procedure. This killed the vision and the artist side of game design. Navigation to improve usability in RPGs. Navigation elements in UI to improve usability in RPGs.
Menu navigation or world navigation?
I don't know what it was explicitly was. It turned out to be world navigation, but I was kind of stoked for this and was let down. So they looked at Fallout New Vegas, Grand Theft Auto, Call of Duty, Modern Warfare. They also made a Unity game with a minimap, so they really just focused around the minimap. And then they made this little Unity game with the minimap, and they had people play the game without the minimap and with the minimap, and it's just a stupid go here, get this, then go here and turn this in. And then they just asked people, did you find it easier? Did you find it improve your experience? And basically 90% said yes, which I felt was a real poor way to survey the results. But yeah, this entire study was hey, people like minimaps.
Okay, so it wasn't the ways to design a good minimap and the options, it was just minimaps good, no minimaps bad.
Right.
Okay.
And you know what? I would have liked, time to complete quest, exploration of map, because when you give people a minimap, right, do I highlight the places to go on the minimap or do I not? Do I just mark the landmarks and let them figure it out? Because what is the impact of exploration when a minimap is available? I didn't drive down random streets in Grand Theft Auto. I followed the GPS to get from one place to the other. If they didn't give me that and I kind of had to read the streets, L.A. Noire, they did do a GPS, but it was kind of shitty. because it was like this weird turn signal thing, and it didn't activate in time enough to really know to turn for it when you were flying down the streets. So I ended up not paying attention to the GPS as much as just heading in the general direction of where I wanted to go. And I kind of explored a little more of the city. I kind of drove around a little more. So that's what I would have liked. I would have liked some more data behind, like, if you have no mini-map, they explored like 90% of the continent, even after they got the item. And it was clear which way they needed to go, they got into exploration mode. But when you gave them a mini-map and you marked the items, that hurt exploration. So, like I said, I was not thrilled about there on there. Oh, yeah. The Smiler 2 pointed out Defender had a great mini-map. Yes, it did. Probably could
first.
be it'd be hard. It might be worth looking around, but it could be a first example of a minimap. The games that were basing Draco Wing off of Draconia, whatever. I don't know. I made the post and looked it up. Draconian, or whatever it was. That had a minimap in it. But both of those are kind of arcade games, not really used for navigation. They were just kind of used for reference. You are here. This next one was a visualization framework for the simulation of fuel consumption. Another grad student working on a PhD analysis. A lot of this was in progress, so I didn't really get a whole lot of it that's applicable out of it, and I think his analysis was kind of elementary. So basic, like he was kind of building his model up still, and there was assumptions on it of where people drove to and from. There was assumptions of traffic load. There was the assumption that everybody just drove the speed limit, and it was like, yeah, there's a lot more things to model in this world.
And he was just getting to terraforming his models. So.
Yeah, it was kind of cool in that he had video of his model in action, but then also he didn't really have the system, because I think modeling traffic has been done before. What you really need is the system to come back and say, widen this lane, get rid of that exit that actually causes more traffic than it helps, change the lights here to be timed this way, and these are how you can improve traffic. But very, very sharp kid, though. Seemed very sharp. Had other conversations with him on other things during the conference. Low-cost portable virtual environment system. And I was disappointed. At no point did this session mention the holodeck. But this is basically what they were trying to create. They were making this backpack and then VR goggles, and then you would go into a gymnasium, and now you wander around the virtual world. And the really cool thing that they had kind of discovered is that the sight sense trumps all other sense. And so if they change your movement greater than 1-to-1 on sight in the goggles, right?
Right.
If you have no other senses, right? If your ears are covered and things like that, even though you're walking in this gymnasium, they can make you turn in a circle in a gymnasium while you think you only turned a quarter of a turn in real life. And so they basically then discussed the number of different algorithms they had tried to get people to walk around this gymnasium and not bump into walls while they think they walked on this world, that the virtual world is 3 times the size that they actually have in the real world to walk around in. And it was pretty cool. For the most part, people did not notice. Some people felt off. They didn't feel sick. Nobody ever felt sick. Nobody ever reported that. They did just kind of feel disoriented. They said there was a slight disorientation the entire time. Like something is off about this, but nothing to the case. And they can also say it could have been our refresh rates, of time between their head movement and update, like if you've seen the videos on John Carmack, where he's doing the VR at E3, he talks about that in length of trying to get the latency down to nothing, because that's a big problem with believability in the VR world. Also disappointed they didn't mention anything about John Carmack and all the work that he's done on this, and some of the lower cost VR systems that are coming out now. They were definitely using the high end ones, but I thought that was cool. I thought that was a pretty cool, exploration of tech going on there. Diagnosis of ADD through games. I think I've really covered this earlier in the podcast. more cognitive brain enhancement and language disorder treatment. I couldn't get any real notes from this because they basically played a video. The professor wasn't there to give her talk, and they played this video, and the audio was horrible, and yet they played it anyway. Like, nobody heard this talk. And it was funny. It was just kind of people, like, looking around at each other of, like, nobody can hear this.
I was in the front row, right beside you. I have 2 ears,
Like,
and I could not hear
nobody
this.
made that call. Nobody made the decision of, like, yeah, this is wasting everybody's time. Let's go into the next session. There was a session on Connect and gesture recognition, which actually was a bunch of research into getting Connect to identify fingers so that Connect could read sign language and teach you sign language. The guy that did the presentation, who's working on the project, has some motor coordination and speech impediments, which was kind of unfortunate because he couldn't really himself demo sign language because he couldn't do that as well.
But when he
did show it some, though. I mean, he did get up there and show the basics, but he couldn't do some of the advanced sign languaging stuff to do on that. So, but it looked really good. I mean, it looked really good that they're being able to take Connect. I didn't ask questions on this one, but I did kind of want to know, like, if they had looked into the new PC version of the Connect hardware, because it has a greater resolution and is meant to be worked at a much closer location. But man, they had gotten theirs down to like an 85% to 100% accuracy on sign language detection, even in extremely low light conditions. So they squeezed a lot out of Connect. I was impressed with what they had gotten out of it. And he did talk about like how they did it. You know, like there was some interesting methods of determining fingers, of whether or not you look at the fingers based on the orientation to the other fingers, or they actually found a better way of looking at the fingers position based on the angle from the center of the palm. Like they could orient your palm, and then they could like know like your other fingers generally go off in these degrees, and then they could kind of know where those fingers were based on that, rather than like length of fingers or distance between fingers and things like that. It was kind of interesting. Different ways that they had tried. Let's see. Wait. I think I turned a page and I missed an important line. Yes. Framework for interactive music in games. I was really obviously very interested on this one. Now this actually turned out to be a way of dynamic music generation.
Right.
And at the level that he had, this just generated notes in a sequence that might be interesting, but it didn't even do rhythms at this point. So it was pretty, I don't know, it was not impressive at this stage. A lot of his underlying reasons for note algorithm choicing was kind of interesting, but like the results weren't there yet to where it would be interesting. I did have a conversation with him about Captain Dubstep, and I didn't realize this, but he's one of the ones that was a gamer. And he's like, man, if that comes out on Xbox Live Indie Games, you let me know, because I will totally, check that out. Because I explained to him how we were doing it. It wasn't dynamic music generation, it was dynamic music mixing, the way we were approaching it. But I was interested to know, like, how his project works out and follow up, on that, because it was a good start. It was definitely a good start. And then I asked him, like, how would you make this system responsive to actions of the gamer? Like what we're going to do in Captain Dubstep. And so he basically said it would be possible to use actions in a state machine in your game to switch between musical profiles. And that you could actually, the way he's got it like set up, like this is a Bach profile, or this is a Goo Goo Dolls profile, or this is like based on the types of things that they would do in their music, you could make that a profile.
Kind of like how Pandora works, I guess.
Yes. Like you have that fingerprint, and now you can generate music in that fingerprint, and you could kind of use that to change up the style of music from the battle music to the wandering music, but do it in a way that actually generated the transition moments too. So I thought that was promising, but like I said, very far away from being doable at the current stage. Physics engine on low power devices. So this was given by a woman who works at Samsung. She is a PhD doing research, but basically they were building a physics engine for Samsung devices, and she cornered me after my keynote and like wanted me to release our games on Samsung devices. And I'm kind of like, well, we're doing X and A right now, and then we're going to use Unity because Steam and iOS. Like, we got to go where the money is. So, if your Samsung devices support Unity, then all right, we're there. But like the idea of supporting a Samsung device with a Samsung framework, no.
I would just assume that most
efficient it is. But
I would assume most Samsung devices are running Android.
And it was, I think.
Yeah.
But the framework was specific to Samsung's
the
physics chips and things
not...
like that. So, wavelet transform to ID. Oh, yeah, forget this one. Yeah, this was a guy who was IDing avatars by 2D screenshots to track players. And it's like to find terrorists and things like that, you know, like in Second Life. And I'm just thinking like, what? They have usernames, IP addresses, like there's so many better ways to track people on a virtual world. Plus, I don't think Al-Qaeda is going into Second Life, like making Al-Qaeda looking dudes with long beards and all that stuff. They're probably making young hot chicks to attract the young adolescent males who are the makeup of the Al-Qaeda recruit. And you know what? They're probably varying them between accounts. And they probably know to hide their tracks a little bit. By the way, if you start talking to someone and he starts trying to tell you about extremist Islam ideals, maybe that's a better clue than what his avatar looks like. So, I don't know. That's one of the moments where I'm like, why do you have funding for this? Like, no part of this makes sense. Like, if you were figuring out better methods for facial recognition based upon avatar detection or something, like that helped facial camera recognition, okay, maybe. But, like, why would you 2D scan in an avatar?
That sounds like they're going off the pre-existing assumption that this is how, they're terrorists using Second Life or whatever, like,
And there was also assumption that, like, people create the same avatars as themselves.
Right. The research works in a world where certain things
most
are
people
true.
probably create avatars similar to themselves. Go look at Xbox Me or Xbox and Me's, right? But most people aren't recruiting for a shady organization in which you would hide your identity, which then totally screws up your entire premise. So, the next guy up was using the Ceres Lambdas learning methodology for creating more intelligence bots. And again, I don't remember if you're using Unreal Tournament or Quake 3, but this is another one where I'm like, well played, sir. Well played. Your PhD is in writing better bot AI, you know? Let's see, he basically talks about pathfinding, finding power-ups, which weapons. So this Sursa Lambda algorithm is known. So if you look up the Sursa algorithm, you could probably find it a little bit. And it essentially works upon this reward system. So you give weights like, hey, if that action resulted in health, +1. If that action resulted in a kill, +10. If that action resulted in you getting killed, -10. And so you kind of weight all the actions based upon this card, and then sets of actions get weighted on this card, and essentially you do this like 80% of the time you're exploring, 20% of the time you're exploring the world, the bot's exploring and finding new methods, and then 80% of the time it's doing its best known methods. So it switches between that of like, I'm in exploration mode, like everything's safe, I'm not getting shot, I see no players. Okay, let me run down this corridor, let me jump off here, where does this go? Okay, now I'm back into, okay, I know the best way to hunt, I know the best spot to camp, that kind of thing. Basically, he was able to do better than randomized, but he didn't post studies whether he was better to improve upon the bots that came with Unreal Tournament 4, or UT 2004, is what he used. And, of course, he's still doing work on it, and of course, he's also got to play it against human players, because it was just bots versus bots, where he was using smart bots versus smart bots, and then smart bots versus bots that just randomized their actions, and then he used random bots versus random bots to kind of base all his study out from. But, you know, it gave me some ideas of like the weighted based system and rewarding the AI for things it's done based on a scale, and then let it learn from that, so that maybe it will begin to learn based on the players' reactions, and what the players do, it can adapt tactics. So that seemed to be kind of a good thing. So again, that's a StarSat algorithm if you want to go look that up. The next talk was a really good talk. I wrote a lot of details down, but the overall gist is it was a handicap point system for pedometer challenges. So if you guys are doing these at work or something, these are these walk challenges where everybody wears a pedometer for a week, and then they all sync up, and then like they post leaderboards of
who took the most
steps and all that. The problem is people drop out of them, because you have the hardcore runners and walkers. They rack up 1,000 steps, or 10,000 steps a week. And then like in 2 weeks, you can't compete with them anymore. And then so people give up. And it's like, well, the point of this is to get people healthy and walking. And the people who need it most are the ones who give it up. So basically apply a bowling like handicap score system to the thing to keep everybody playing. So I wrote a lot of notes about a lot of details on that, because we kind of do this at work. And I want to kind of see if, I can up the participation in the program by, the handicap ideals in that. Plus, when you have handicap things like bowling, you can have leagues. And that kind of makes it more fun as well, because you can group up and have your league versus my league and, things like that. And that's also a good thought as to other leaderboard systems, of like, yeah, the top leaderboards may be fun for the power gamers, but having the handicap leaderboard makes it so that everybody can jump in at any time, right, and might keep your game more accessible. There was a good keynote after that on educating our students through games. And it was really high level, but one thing I took away is that if you teach something, you learn it better yourself. Okay, so it was basically trying to get games that teach you to teach something, was the point of the games, and how they could make that better. And a game called Betty's Brain was at the center of this research and study. I don't know if you can get that online, but if you can, it's worth looking up. I had an RPG idea out of an example that was in his thing. So he was talking about like making these games where players have to solve the game by teaching AI in the game, the subject matter, because then you learn the subject matter if you have to teach it. And excuse me, I'm getting a little hot. The thing I started thinking about is, what if you had an RPG world, RPG game idea, and the idea in normal RPGs is you go into a town, and the town's all screwed up. That's because some wizard stole the something thing, and you as the hero go to the cave where the wizard's at, and you beat up the wizard, and you take the thing back, and you put it back to the store, and the town's restored. Oh, you're the hero. Well, what if, like, the town was, like, decimated, but you restored the town by teaching the blacksmith how to blacksmith? Or teaching somebody in the town how to blacksmith. And to do that, of course, you have to learn about, like, you're going to need a hammer and an anvil. You're going to have to mix carbon and iron to make steel. You're going to have to mix it in the right proportions, because if you're making a blade, you want very brittle steel that holds an edge well, but shatters on impact. but then you want malleable steel for like armor, so it can absorb a blow better and not shatter. And so, you have to go through all these concepts that go into metalworking through the game. And of course, the game gives you the ability to do that. And then you teach that to the NPCs and help them. And then that rebuilds the town and economy. And even, talking with my brother, like imagine like maybe you're raising an army or something, and if you go into the town, maybe the town's functioning and all that, but you can teach the blacksmith to make better weapons. Therefore, your army gets better stats now, when you go over and take over more towns. So that idea came out of the whole, like, the teacher learns as much as the student in that scenario. By the way, there's a lot of data that had to back that up. That is very, very true. In almost all situations, teachers are learning as much, if not more, than the students. So their problem, of course, was getting students to teach each other. Like, how do you do that? If you don't know anything about the subject matter, it becomes a little more of a challenge. And that's where their game, Betty's Brain, came out of, where you teach Betty the concepts and then Betty takes the test. So the kids don't take the test, Betty does. And when Betty fails the test, then the kids try to reteach Betty what was wrong so she can go back and pass it. Let's see. I got a lot of notes out of that session. Teaching science to young children. In Unity, this game was called Rumble Blocks. But essentially this was a building game aimed at K through 3, where they were just basically trying to teach basic architecture fundamentals, like a building with a wide base is stable, that kind of thing. And so they did learn some basics out of there. One was their game needed to be politically correct. So, like, initially, the kids were, like, building, like, candy towers and things like that would appeal to kids, and the parents got, like, all upset, we
took down Cookie Monster, we will take you down too!
Too much reinforcement of candy and stuff like that in the game. So they changed it up, and they made it kind of like steel structures, but then they found, like, the kids were bored with it until they gave it a story. So, like, they didn't change the gameplay. They gave, like, 30 seconds of exposition that these were aliens stranded on random planets, and they needed to build an energy tower to power their ship to get home. And the kids went, got it. I got the story. I'm engaged now. So it was kind of interesting, and, like, story was important, but how little story was important, like, just give me an excuse,
I will name them myself, and this one shall be Bob.
You'll fill in the details if the story engages you.
Obviously 3D did not work well among young kids. It was too many new concepts at once, so they stuck 2D. Tutorial, so they did have a tutorial in the game of, like, how to play and how to put the blocks together, and it went over well with and without voiceover. And these are K through 3, so they can't rely on reading. So they were just kind of large arrows and things like that, so they added a voiceover of, like, click the block and drag it here and things like that. And they were kind of surprised to know, like, kids did fine whether or not they had the voiceover. So they actually kind of opted, I think, to have it out, because they thought the kids might be engaged more and think more to it. The other thing is that when they worked with experts was to feature removing blocks from towers versus just adding blocks from towers, because the experts were saying you're not teaching them the weakness of these things, like the Zynga problem, right?
Right.
So they did focus on that. Let's see. Too much helping of the kids, too much help, too much tutorial in the game. Kids rejected the game. They said they basically think the kids thought of it was a teaching game. And it's like, fucking take your Oregon Trail shit and shove it up your ass. We're not going to take this teaching shit here. We're going to play games.
Oregon Trail really wasn't a teaching game, though.
No, it wasn't. That's what I was thinking. Like,
the only thing you learned was dysentery was a thing.
Okay, math typing. There you go.
Number crunchers.
Number crunchers, yeah.
Even that was fun.
Zombie typing or whatever. Zombie Keys of the Dead or whatever that is. Little animations helped a lot. So when, like, animations of the aliens blinked and the blocks sparkled, and just small touches greatly increased the engagement of the game, with that. His colleague wrote... Oh, that's not the one I have. I don't have... The Book of Lenses. I have the Designing Virtual Worlds. Okay. I don't know why that one's not on my list.
I thought you had it.
I have it. It's on my list, or I just didn't pull up. But his colleague wrote the Book of Lenses, and the Book of Lenses is one that have been recommended highly, including by extra credits, and that was one of his colleagues. Also online, they did a lot of profiling or with the game, or he didn't do this, but another developer of games focused at education, of a game called Refraction. And what the guy did was he uploaded multiple versions of the game, so like all built slightly different, menus slightly different, gameplay slightly different, and he just uploaded them to different destinations. So like if you go to one Flash, like if you go to Congregate, you'll get a different version than if you go to like was it Albion Sheep or whatever Flash portal? Yeah. Like you'll get different versions of the game intentionally. Like these aren't just versions; these are like A/B testing type things. So I thought that was good. There was a horrible session that I kind of wish I left for and went home, but we went home afterwards. It was called Social Relations and MMORPG play or MMOG play, and basically ways to frame big data of the social interactions. So I went in like thinking like, oh great, here's going to be a great deep study of social interactions, and it was horrible. It was nothing. I mean, there was no meat to this talk. There was basically some philosophical questions of whether you should study the group from afar or you should immerse yourself in the group, and that if you immerse yourself in the group, should you use people who are highly experienced with the group or should you use people who are not? You know? Basically, like, at some point I wrote in there, this is WoW like me, you know, is what, they're doing here. And yes, it was in World of Warcraft. And no, they didn't draw any, like, conclusions from it or anything. And the whole, like, big data thing and all that, they were like, it should be possible to get like logs and interactions and crunch that and get data. And I'm like, so you don't have that data? Because like if you don't have that data now, no one's giving it to you. Like Blizzard, if you haven't contacted Blizzard and say, hey, we can have this data, and they said yes, you need to do that because they're probably going to say no. You know, there's probably privacy concerns, and also there's corporate espionage type concerns and things like that. They're going to say no. They're not going to give that to you.
You know, privacy concerns, I'm not even sure they would do it in-house.
Yeah. So, anyway, that was the conference. That was the Serious Games, CGames conference. I think it's called Computer Games, but it basically focused on serious games. So overall, you know, I got a lot of notes out of it. I got a lot of takeaway from it. There's a lot of, like, I wish there would be more industry involved, even if it was more indies, to present, because I think the overlap was good. I think I was invited back next year. I think that.
You think you were invited back?
They kind of did. They kind of like said like, hey, so next year, and I'm like, I don't know what I would submit to next year, and it feels kind of bad to do keynotes in a row. And since all of their other talks
are
academic, and they have to have all these research and stats and stuff behind it, I don't have that. So I don't know. I think if we do it again, I think what I might say is, hey, this is interesting. Would you be interested if I get you more industry speakers under the assumption that these talks, now that I've been there, I can tell them like what I think would be a good talk here. A good talk here would not be intro to C# and how you make a game. A good talk would be thoughts on what makes games fun, thoughts on what makes games work, thoughts on these games, studies of these games and things like that. But coming from an industry perspective, not coming from an academic perspective.
I assume they have multiple sessions going on at the same time.
They do not.
They do not, okay.
It is one room, one session.
So you would have to, I was going to say, I guess they could do a parallel track.
And they also do 20-minute sessions.
Wow.
Fortunately, I got an hour for a keynote. But yeah, they do 20-minute sessions.
Wow. That's tough. I mean, you basically have to...
Well, because everybody has a paper and all their stuff is on a disc that's handed out to you.
Yeah.
So...
You don't have to go through too
really
much.
like a summary of like, make a note of like, go look up their stuff on disc.
Okay.
So I don't know. Maybe I can get like, and you know, and I get more, I mean like 2 or 3.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. Not like a parallel track or something,
Right,
but
yeah.
something they can add in.
I think if they were open to that too, I would go back, and then I would also plan the time to stay through all the social events that they have.
Yeah.
And mingle a little more. But as it was, like a lot of their talks, man, were hard for me to sit through, even though they were 20 minutes. Like I was clawing my way out, and I would just tell Cicely, okay, this break, we're going to disappear. And then we're going to come back after the next break. And then we're just going to like take the next 2-hour block off. Even though they were like 1.5 to 2 hour blocks, and they were like 25-minute sessions apiece. Yeah, I needed my time out.
I got a lot of physical artwork done.
Yeah, the funny thing is like for all this talk, like she sat there and did more game design. Granted, this is for a
pen and paper
board, yeah, type pen and paper game, but yeah, than actually had occurred by most people there. Not to knock it as horrible. Like I think this is to be expected. These are different circles, and like I said, there was a lot I learned as the industry, quote unquote, industry side from the academics. So I think there could be exchange on both sides. Let's get to some Kickstarters, because I actually backed a Kickstarter. It's been a while, man, but yeah, I backed Castle Story, which launched like last Friday. So it launched like the day that we do this. So this is on the edge. But essentially, I'm going to jump forward a little bit in the video. The video is really cute, but you got this dude. You got several little guys, these cute little guys, and they kind of like Minecraft mine and build for you, right? So it's kind of like a Minecraft world, except you got guys building for you. So you just basically say like, hey, make some stairs over here, make this item over here, and they kind of go gather wood and do all this thing like you would expect.
Like lemmings.
But then, like, as nightfall comes, there are like these evil rock creatures that want like your crystals and stuff. And then so you got like little soldier units,
Cute
and then
soldiers.
like you have like this tower defense mode that it kicks into
Teddy
at night.
Rangers.
You know, so I don't know. I'm like, man, this looks great, and the idea looks solid, and I backed it because it's been a while.
Chibi golems fighting teddy bear rangers.
And you know, we talk about a lot of decent Kickstarters, but very few have I in recent months felt backworthy from me personally.
Yeah.
And this was one. And this thing like blew up and was funded in 5 hours too. So that is Cave Story.
Castle Story.
Castle Story. Cave Story is something else.
Yes.
It's on my Steam account and I have not played it.
I've actually, while I was waiting for the PC situation to get resolved, I actually picked that up out of my.
Stegger loves that. Did you enjoy it?
I'm still in the process of playing it. Like I said, I just went down my Humble Bundle list, but
That's what I remember of that game. Stegs loves it. Shadow Remnants. Let's see. This one, a lot of talk. This guy's an experienced developer and has what looks like to be a pretty decent looking tactical RPG. So kind of your Final Fantasy Tactics type looking game going on. But yeah, it looks like he kind of has the graphic chops and things going, building his game. Is he the one that has like some gameplay video I can just fire up down here? No, he has some different art and stuff like that. Oh, but now he's looking for $75,000. That's a lot to look for. But like I said, he's done other games, so he's probably looking at it of like the budgets that he's used to working with. In that, so the thing is that it's not launched quick out of the gate, so hopefully there will be more awareness of it, because it looks like for a tactical RPG, it looks like it'll be a decent one. So everybody, you know, all happy about the Ouya, but screw your Ouya, because now we got an Oculus. And this is basically the Kickstart version of what John Carmike was playing with. And it's basically like $300. Then they're billing it as dev kits now, of like, we give you the SDK, play with it, figure out what games you can write for it, and help us figure out what the consumer version needs to be. But it essentially goes into why the tech's working now and why the price point's coming down. And there's a ton of quotes. John Carmack, Cliffy B. I love it. They quote Cliff Bleszinski as Cliffy B. Like, I think he's come out of, like, cut that out. Like, I'm Cliff Bleszinski, the whole Cliffy B, young guy thing, I've kind of played out. But yeah, they quote him on there. There's a Gabe Newell comment in here. What's weird is, like, there are very, the Unity founder, they are very, by the way, supports Unreal Engine and Unity. They are very, heavy on the quotes, and they're all like high well shot with, aperture lenses, and I'm like, man, these guys, are they really that popular? Are they like paying these people? Because some of these testimonials feel wooden, and like they're holding up cue cards, and like line. Okay, yeah, I love the Oculus because it is a great, whatever product. But, again, it's really good tech. And like I said, John Carmack was all over at E3 and what it can do. And like I said, this is not to consumers. So they're not trying to like build this as a console with a service. This one is like, hey, we are still starting up. And they talk about how they have a 110-degree field of vision and things like that. So it's interesting. I kind of want to back a set for $300 to get one, but then I go,
that's $300.
That's $300 for a Virtual Boy. Like, okay.
It makes sense if you're like hardcore doing 3D game development. Like this model actually makes a lot of sense for things like the Ouya and
right,
building
like launching
systems.
the Ouya first to like indies for development of like, we're going to put together some prototype consoles, and they're going to be a little higher price, but then you're going to shape what you need out of this to make this go live. And
you're paying for early access to development kits and feedback.
But it does come with John Carmack's Doom 3 edition ported to the Oculus.
Wow, which I guess is good because it's a good example of what you can do with
you get like a solid example, and then you're like, I don't want to play that.
Even, I mean, for all the negative stuff about the Ouya, even if this fell through, like, at least we're getting closer to the model of what a console or a system on Kickstarter.
Right, don't run out and sell to sell vaporware to consumers. Like, phase this thing in. The next one I got up, I honestly probably would not have put up if it didn't, like, launch August 3rd, today, and it was funded, in, like, no time flat.
How much did they ask for?
But this is like a prequel to Fallen London. I don't know the game Fallen London, but apparently there's a built-in fan base that was leveraged here. And they made this prequel to their game. Really great art style. Looks like it's kind of a storied adventure game. They don't really get the gameplay footage in the Kickstarter video, but I guess you can kind of go check out what the other game was. Looks like it might have like some card-based thing. I don't know. I didn't quite grasp what this was, but yeah, there's a fan base built in. So that just kind of highlights like some of the value of Kickstarter. Of like, if you build your fan base, then you could just turn to them and say like, this is what I'm doing next, and you might have a successful Kickstarter out the gate. Which again, it's really pre-orders, but they're your fans, man. They're the ones that want to pre-order. They want to support you. And as Seth Godin would say, that's your tribe, and this is the way of calling the tribe to action. Which is the purpose of having the tribe, is to mobilize it, and that could be for anything. That could be for causes, or that could be for your next endeavor. So that's a good one. GamerCon, Everybody Games. This is an LGBT gaming conference, or a gaming conference that will discuss LGBT issues. Kind of interesting because we're at a point of very extreme low tolerance. That's been a running news story item. There was a news story I didn't put up this week that I could have, of a developer at Ubisoft did an interview, female developer behind Assassin's Creed, and was talking about this, and like comments in the forum thread were like, you know, shut up bitch and show me your titties. You know, and this was like, you know, on like a PC Gamer developer interview article, and it was just, it got news because like, yeah, it didn't happen with a male developer at all. She's talking about a very successful franchise and directions that it went in and things they've learned and all that, things that, you know, are great insight, and half the comments are that way, you know, and joking on that and riffs on that, and so, it'll be interesting. I hope it goes well. I hope it doesn't become a giant lightning rod issue, and I hope they can have a conversation and just start some constructive dialogue without a lot of anger and yelling and stuff built into it. Because they said like these conferences happen in other art mediums, like they happen for movies and things like that, where, you know, it's open to everyone, but the focus of the topics will be this kind of like, you know, how's this going forward and how's our art better representing this. The thing is, I think it's a good topic. I think with gaming, it can almost just be a generic diversity games conference.
Yeah.
You know, like, we're not up to the point where it's just LGBT. We're like, no, any variants. In fact, even non-variants. You know, just like...
If you're a little bit more mature in your
Yeah.
brain set, then you're automatically not in...
Oh, yeah.
But it looks like it's getting funded, so it looks like it'll pull off and happen. Why did I put Rush Brothers in here?
I don't know.
This...
Hi, guys.
Yeah, this guy does this weird thing where he sits in front and talks kind of weird. Talks about a big fan base and mashing up a couple different platformer and multiplayer genres and things like that. I can't remember why I ended up putting. Maybe I just like at the end like, okay, I'll put it in there. It does look like he's decent and can execute on the game and things like that. And he does say like the big black areas. He's not trying to go for a limbo effect. That's just placeholder graphics. But he talks about like wanting to have replayability and leveling up and things like that kind of stuff, and levels influenced by your MP3 library and racing game type stuff involved. Seems interesting. I think a really poorly edited Kickstarter video. I think it really does a disservice to how back and forth it is between the game and the speaker and the game and the speaker and the game and the speaker, and that doesn't give you a sense of like, okay, so what's the game? Just give me the game. But it doesn't seem, you know, it launched a couple days ago, but it has not gotten much money, and it is looking for 50 grand. I put the Dark Prophecy iPad game in. Make sure this isn't the one that has... Okay, no. Looking for the one that has video separately on the gameplay. Let's just jump into there. I put this in here because this game is a throwback to like the classic Bard's Tale and Wizardry type things, such to the point where it has like the 3D view is up in a window, and like that for me kind of hit a nostalgia button a little bit, you know, because I played some of those in Ultima Underworld and things like that, and swiping. Unfortunately, it is an iPad game, so
you can't play it on an iPhone.
Yeah, it's like you gotta have an iPhone or you gotta have an iPad. That's gonna hurt the success rates because, you know, I don't have a regular iPad set up to where I game on, and there's no reason this could be on PC. You know, doing a throwback Bard's Tale on PC would be fine. So I think that's gonna hurt him in the long run, but I kinda, like, the nostalgia button was pushed for me, on those. The next one, it's successful. Got in there, launched, a couple days ago. Asked for $500, up to 845. And not much gameplay shown. Looks like it's going to be more adventure game. But essentially, it's like, hey, play from the view of the duck. The duck is no longer the joke or the antagonist. The duck is the point, and you play Mama Duck, and you try to get your baby ducks. They're lost, and along the way, like I scroll down here, he's got like a photo. You meet these interesting characters that, you know, involve your quests and such. But good example of like, I just need $500 and, you know, successful. You know, people funded that. I think a lot has to do with the video looking well and like, yes, you'll be able to make a duck game. You've done pixel art and you've got that, so it looks good. The next one I have up is actually hardware, and it is the Blade Pad, a detachable iPhone gamepad. Now, this thing I think is $75 to get one. Limited $59, but then goes up to $69. So $70 to get one. And retail will be $100. This basically turns your they don't say this, but this turns your iPhone, and right now they're only looking at iPhone. In fact, they're only looking at like 4S iPhones and iPhone 5s to start with. Again, because they're making physical hardware, I guess.
So it's not like a wireless sort of thing?
Bluetooth, and it will technically work with other ones.
It's just, I think, it doesn't fit the form factor.
I think they're not going to try to make all the form factors fit. So what it is like a two-part like case and then gamepad. So you can actually snap you put the iPhone in the iPhone case. So you got like a bumper, and then that just kind of snaps into the game controls, and then it just kind of slides out like a DS, and it looks about the size, and all the videos look like people holding about it, like it has the bulk and the weight of a DS.
What is the Vita?
Yeah, but the Vita doesn't kick out, right?
I know. Well, I mean the one before the Vita,
So
it looks like a PlayStation product.
Oh, you're talking about the Xperia Play, the phone that has the gamepad by Sony.
Mm-hmm.
That had Minecraft ported to it. Because they paid Notch money. Yes. And Notch doesn't have a problem with your platform if you give him money, but if you don't, then he has a problem with the closeness of your platform. It looks good. I would like to see this succeed. I think, you know, being an add-on device, it's gonna be a hard sell, I think, because you really need to launch with a long list of games supporting it. But, it looks good. Like, the device kicked out, like it has a D-pad, 2 thumbsticks, start and select buttons, and 4 regular buttons. So, I mean, you're pretty much covered for what you would want to do. Even with it on the phone, like it's great that it snaps off so easy, but I think I could carry the whole thing in my pocket. Like, it doesn't look bad. They shot a lot of real... Like, this is a physical thing. This exists. So... Unfortunately, I just think it's going to be hard to get uptake on a physical add-on device. Because there have been Bluetooth and iPhone, like, controller attempts. And I don't think any of them take off well. The next game up here, this is a great video to come watch, because this is creepy as all get out. Because a guy gets a phone, real creepy call. Now, the guy that does the voice here is the voice of Solid Snake. But he's going to be the creepy guy voice in the game. And basically, you'll get this call from your phone that we have hostage one of your friends, and you now have to do what we say to get them back. And... it seems like you have to be ready for calls at any time, and that kind of stuff. So it did talk about a little bit that there would be an app on your phone to simulate the game world, right? So you would have an alternate like email app and things like that, but all this would exist inside of the game app, so it wouldn't be like, once you have the game app, you just play within the game. Now, the other thing is that you actually get a real person who's the hostage. And supposedly they give up personal information about you So they have like a meta game where they give up interesting stuff about you to make the hero, the savior, right, the person that rescues the hostage, experience more personalized. So this seemed, for one of these augmented reality type games, more involved, more ambitious, but not sure they can pull it off, really, because it seems like once you've played it once or twice, it's going to be kind of an ad-lib, like a Mad Lib type thing, and it's like, okay, once I've heard the thing, I know, like, where this goes and what these options are.
And the problem with using one of your friends as the quote-unquote hostage is I could imagine this becoming like, like the updates you get on Facebook, like, so-and-so wants you to be a hostage in,
Right. Yeah.
In Hostageville.
So, at first I was kind of like the way it's all presented in the video, and for the longest time, if you go down to like the YouTube video and like how this is actually working, I was thinking like, both people are playing the hostage and the hero, and it's like, how are they connected to each other? And, is everybody, like, aware of this? Because out of context, this would be awful. This would really go bad fast,
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Interesting concept. The last one I have up here is Zelda Motion. A Link to the Past, the animated series. So apparently there was some manga of Link to the Past. Are you familiar with this? Or?
I've heard of it.
I know there was and I may be thinking of something different. I know there was a comic series in Nintendo Power that they did, but
it wasn't for sale individually here in the States.
So essentially they want to animate and voice act. This basically is based on that story and manga, and maybe it was only released in Japan and stuff like that. So, it's interesting. Hey, make this animated thing, but this is a fan art thing. So this is not backed with anybody with any licensing or permission. And what's interesting is at the bottom they have, hey, all Legend of Zelda related material is owned and copyrighted by Nintendo, and is no way owned by the Apathy Industries. Zelda Motion is a fan project and will not be sold in any way.
But you're still, with Kickstarter being kind of a concept of pre-orders, it seems like...
Well, there's money involved.
Yes.
And there have been... So the danger on this one is it getting taken down.
Have they said...
I haven't written this article. We talked a little about this before the podcast. But Kickstarter is actually quite stringent on their DMCA and copyright violation takedowns. They don't suspend a project, they out and out delete it. So there was a project that was up a few weeks ago, and it was like a remix of Final Fantasy IV or something, and it was like a fan remix or something that were doing it, and like there's this...
I saw that. There's this OC remix.
Yes. So there's like this community of people who are doing these remixes, and they're left alone. But when they popped up on the remix, basically, and it got teased out through forum posts and all that, because Kickstarter revealed no information, but Square Enix shut them down. They sent a cease and desist, a DMCA takedown, because it doesn't matter that you plan to give away the album, you're taking money now. Like, Kickstarter, you are getting money to do this project, and you may say you're not selling it, but if you're giving it away, then the money could potentially be profit.
Yeah, and I mean, do they define what they need the money for? Like, I assume if it's licenses for software, that's one thing.
See, this isn't like licenses, or we're going to approach Nintendo and pay royalties to license it or something like that.
Well, no. I mean, like hey, we need a legitimate copy of Premiere or whatever. My thinking is like
funding will be used to complete the episodes.
Yeah, if it's just like
75% through the first one, so they have the technology.
If it's just like we're gonna take we're gonna stop working so we can focus on this full time.
That's kind of the definition of
that becomes
paid work.
Yeah,
because you give away the result, but you were paid to be able to make the result. Yeah. So I don't know. There's like I said before the podcast, there's wrong on both sides here. First of all, there's this very naive concept of like, if you give it away for free, then you can take somebody else's stuff. And it's like, no, you can't. That's one of many criteria. And no, you're not giving it away for free. You are taking money. It is a Kickstarter. Yeah. So you lose that argument. And the other side is how Kickstarter will just eventually just probably delete this project. It'll just get straight up deleted. If Nintendo finds out and complains and sends a DMCA notice, these projects get deleted and everybody gets an email in their box saying their funding of this project was canceled. Thank you, and please go fund more projects. They don't even explain it, what happened. So there's some thing on Kickstarter side. I would like Kickstarter to post on the projects a little thing that was suspended, or, hey, this project was suspended for copyright violations or copyright dispute, and it may return if it is resolved, you know, and just letting people know what's going on. And hey, you know, if the copyright owners say it's okay, then it can come back. But if they don't, because Square Enix might allow the Remix project to go forward because they've been okay so far.
Yeah.
Right? These guys actually want to make a CD, right? And make a physical CD and kind of as a memento of all the things they've been, you know, the fan work and stuff like that, and make this 4-disc set. And so since Square is kind of laid off the site and not shut down the site, maybe they'll allow that, but...
Well, they do more than just
Square is going to have to be involved, and no money's going to have to go to anyone but Square for that, you know? So maybe that's what will happen from that, but... This is a case where it is not better to ask for forgiveness or permission.
Yeah.
So that wraps up the Kickstarters for the week, and that wraps up the podcast. In 2 podcasts, this is our 98th episode. Our next is our 99th episode.
99.
But then we will have our 100th. So we're trying to figure out... what that's going to be. Hopefully I'll have something to announce next episode for our 100th episode. I feel like we should do something. Because usually I've switched podcasts by then.
Yeah.
We've done more than 100 consecutive podcasts. We just keep calling them different things. Whether it was Chainsaw Buffet, or that was Feel the Funk, or, you know, that's now GameMarx. You know, so that's a good milestone for us. Even this one technically changed, but we kept the name.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, tune in for that. But until then, thank you everyone for tuning into the live stream, hanging out in chat and watching us. Thank you everyone who watches us on YouTube and everyone who downloads the audio podcast. I checked our stats and we're getting close to 100 subscribers as well. And I was like, wow, that has slowly increased since we have switched to developer focused. So we're doing some things right. I don't say we're doing everything right, but we are doing some things right on the podcast. So it was great. Until next time, everyone, thank you for watching, and we'll be back in a week.